I'm talking today with Professor Rick Burton from Syracuse University, where he's the David B. Falk Endowed Professor of Sports Management. And we might start, first of all, welcome.
Thank you, mate.
Rick. We might start with, who was David B. Falk?
He was Michael Jordan's agent, and I think generally given credit for being one of the most powerful basketball agents, kind of a super agent, representing some of the biggest names in basketball. And for a while, I think he was the most powerful man in basketball, right up there next to David Stern, who was the commissioner, because David had such influence on what prices players were signing for, what salaries they were earning. Yeah.
Okay, and Rick, you're out here to advise the UQ connection with the Olympic Games, and also to give you a keynote address on fan engagement and leveraging innovation for Brisbane 2032. But if you just allow me a slight bit of indulgence, I read your CV, and you run a course on basketball and American culture.
Yeah, it was actually baseball, but it really a fun course, which was kind of to have a chance to look at how much baseball has influenced American culture. And if the listeners were familiar, there's a piece of doggerel poetry called Casey at the Bat, and it's one of the early bits of probably one of America's most famous poems. And really what made it interesting, I think, for American culture was the hero fails, right? Casey comes up to the bat and he strikes out.
Right.
And I think the Yanks took to that, but movies have been made with baseball and theatrical productions with baseball. And so when you kind of look at baseball's role across a couple of centuries, you've got this really interesting place for it in literature and poetry. And so it's been fun teaching it.
But it's also big, well, where can I enroll? Because it sounds interesting. But we used to look at sport with the concept of discrimination in sport and racial, and of course we've got the Jackie Robinson case, and it goes back much further than that.
Yeah.
But is that part of your course?
Yeah, it is. And you have to talk about Jackie because American baseball denies this large segment of the population any ability to play what is really considered America's national pastime. And of course there's a bit of humor in the fact that the Yanks call their championship series the World Series, and there's really only two countries involved, and only because they've got one team in Canada. But Jackie Robinson's really key, and I think it's in its own way it's tied. It's not covered in the class, but I'm thinking of the bloke at the 68 Mexico City Olympics, and Peter Norman, right, is there, during the Black Power salute by the two Yank sprinters. Pete actually came second.
He came second, and the guy who was supposed to win came third.
Yeah, and Peter ran the race of his life, but was sent home for endorsing the Yanks. And I think that we have to look at these racial inequities, and we have to understand that there have been a number of people who stood up or bore the brunt of, and Jackie Robinson's the perfect case of that, which was Branch Rickey, the general manager, was looking for a great athlete who wouldn't fight back where any one of us would have.
Was Carlos? John Carlos?
John Carlos and Tommy Smith were the two runners in that 68 Olympics.
So your involvement with Brisbane 2032, and why did they bring you here?
Well, I think I'm a bit of a futurist, or maybe an agent provocateur. I mean, I'm in a position to be able to, without being much of an expert, but being able to look at some of the advancements in technology and then being able to project ahead how we think that might affect Brisbane 2032. One of the challenges, I think that the reason that John Carney from the University of Queensland Sport brought me over was Brisbane's got a real challenge ahead of it, which is, it's not London, Paris, or Los Angeles. It's Brisbane. Now, Brisbane is now, because of these games and other reasons, a full international city. And Sydney and Melbourne are not going to be able to host the Summer Olympics again because of the seasonality. Brisbane could host again in the 50s or the 60s. And I think that the challenge is going to be that where London kind of had the Queen and James Bond, and Paris had the Seine, and then brought all the teams in on the boats, and the big cities that had held the Olympics in multiple occasions before. Los Angeles, this will be their third go, and they're kind of the Hollywood Olympics or the entertainment Olympics. The real challenge for Brisbane is going to be how do you leverage technology, and how much will the technology jump in the next 7 years? And I think University of Queensland is going to play a really important role with that, because the College of Sport, or the sport college, is really well placed to be on top of how technology is going to affect fan engagement or elite athlete development, of any host of things.
Yeah. So if you look at technology, and we in economics, the main technology in sport we've looked at is data analytics, and the way data analytics is changing policy and developing tactics and things like this. How does it help fan engagement, and particularly in a place like Brisbane?
Well, I think I'm laughing because it seems like from a distance that the biggest issue is the GABA, right?
Yes.
And it's like, make it bigger, and it's like, I think what we're going to see, the modern fan by 2032 is going to want to be much more immersive. So the virtual seat, meaning I'm not actually sitting in the physical stadium, right. I'm sitting in the virtual stadium.
Yep.
And everyone in the virtual stadium can have a front row seat, or can sit, mid-pitch, or sit wherever they want, and they can actually be, I can be in London and you can be in Auckland, but we can appear to be sitting next to each other watching the games in Brisbane. And I can be drinking my Yank lager and you can be drinking something from New Zealand, and it'll be really interesting that I'll turn to you and say, can you believe that? And you'll turn back to me and say, no, I can't. And that virtual engagement is something that I don't know that Brisbane 2032 has really had a chance to think fully about.
Well, the other thing about Brisbane, and you talk about the history of the game, and is the idea of decentralisation and how you can move events around.
Yeah.
And obviously technology is a way in which you do that. Is that the kind of fan engagement you're looking at? So you're not concerned whether you're in Townsville or any part of Brisbane or Queensland, but you can actually share in these games?
Yeah, and I think it's important for the administrators to understand that, Queensland's, the rural politics are really important. So if the perception becomes that the games are only going to benefit Southeast Queensland, and why are we spending all this money for 17 days, and Brisbane's going to, Gold Coast maybe, are going to be the only ones to get anything out of it. We've got to really figure out how to democratize the technology. So, interesting story for you. I was on the ABC yesterday with Kat Feeney, and she was having to announce before I came on the flooding up north, right?
Yes.
Townsville's been buried's the wrong word, but flooded. And she was having to say, it's flooding here and it's flooding here, and you need to be prepared to evacuate and get to higher ground. And then she started to talk about the fact that there were people in northern Queensland that don't even really have phone reception. And I was about to come on and talk about the fact that by 2032 we're going to have 6G technology. And we've got Australians who don't have 4G.
Yeah.
Right, so now we're going to say, we're going to have these massive technology Olympics, but if I'm up above the Daintree or something and I don't actually have an ability to be a part of these games, then at a certain level I think we've failed, because we're not going to be talking about the televised product. I think we're going to be talking about the digital streamed product or the virtual product. And that bloke up in Cooktown has got to be able to be a part of these games.
Right, okay. So, and you've been experienced with games. I mean, I read your CV and I remember your experience with the US marketing in Beijing, but when did it begin? When did you become...
Well, I was only with the USOC a short time, 2007 and 2008. Before that, I was the commissioner of the National Basketball League. We were based in Sydney. But I think that the important part of your question is maybe how long does an Australian Olympic Committee need to prepare for games, or how long does an organizing committee need to prepare to set up? We're 2025. Brisbane Olympic Organizing Committee is on the clock, and they have 7 years to put together whatever they're going to put together. And I believe they'll put on phenomenal games, but there's going to be this mad race to get there, and all along the way the technology is going to be changing.
Well, actually, that wasn't the question, but what you put it was much better.
Yeah.
So this elections, and Queensland is going to have to prepare fairly quickly. And there's been a lot of controversy, about the stadium and the Gabba, and then moving it to Victoria Park. Is this filtered across? Are people aware of this? Does it indicate lack of preparation or incompetence?
No, I think if anyone has been able to pick up the story from away, it's understanding that governments are, bureaucratic. They can be slow. They have to be right. If you do anything to the Gabba, you've got to think about the carbon neutral footprint, and if you go in and you change this bit, you've got to add more seating for maybe people that are in wheelchairs. There are all these factors. I think the average punter goes, they're going to have to go through the paces to get ready.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the media is kind of waiting for someone to say, you've got to build the stadium bigger, the world's going to be coming to Brisbane. There'd be the chance, and you'd know this as an economist, sometimes going smaller is actually better, because what the fan is going to expect that we don't understand yet today in 2025 is the technological requirements of 2032. So the people who go into whatever the Gabba looks like in 2032 are going to expect technological pieces that in some cases haven't even been invented yet.
Yeah, okay. And where would you say, it's difficult to say, but where would Brisbane be in situation or comparison to where Greece was at the same time?
Yeah, Greece was always thought to be well behind. I mean, right up until the start of the games, people were kind of, howling that Athens isn't ready and it's the end of the world as we know it. And the games always happen. The stadiums are always made ready, and the media always has it. It's easy to punch up who's ever putting them on, but then usually everyone comes away and goes, those were great games. Sydney 2000 is kind of a great example, and I think Sydney and the federal government, then John Howard kind of wanting Sydney and Australia to shine. I think those were the tourism Olympics that, and as an economist that Australia used hosting the Olympics in 2000 as a reason for everyone to come to Australia.
Sure.
And I laughingly would say they wrapped it in kangaroos and koala bears, and everyone went, I got to go to Australia. It was not so much about whether we were going to have world records in the stadiums or in the pools. That bit came, but it was, how do I feel about Australia? And everyone came away going, I feel great about Australia. We've got to do that again for Brisbane, but I think now, 32 years later, it's going to have to be driven by technology.
So I can remember a few years ago being asked about whether Brisbane should be bidding and is there a cost and does this bankrupt cities and things like that. And what's your opinion? Is it such a costly exercise now that one city shouldn't have it? Or? Well,
economists, I'm going to see if I answer the question, but you have certain settings, Russia and China, and the government just pays for them.
Sure.
So the economists have a much harder time there. When the media or punters say we're going to build a stadium and it's going to create a lot of construction jobs, the economists usually say you're missing the point. I think that it's Sydney. You and I were joking before we came on that Sydney proclaimed itself to have been net even or neutral, that it didn't go backwards. We didn't. Now again, if we're looking at economic structure, we're going to put a lot of infrastructure into the roads and into the airport and into things that will make people, visitors maybe, feel good about Australia. But if the Bruce Highway washes out north of Mackay, someone going to say, well, they shouldn't have put all that money into the Olympics. Meanwhile, though, the world is suddenly thinking of Brisbane as being the equal of London and Paris. And you can't buy that, but you can't put a price tag on what that value is for the rest of the world to think Brisbane is the place to go in Australia.
Maybe looking at your CV and it's so comprehensive, and you've been involved in a range of sports, but I was particularly interested in the National Basketball League at here.
Yeah.
Do you still keep up with it?
Not as much as I should. I'm very appreciative of what Larry Kesselman has done in running the league. He came in and really took it over and breathed so much more life into it than I was able to do. our hands were a bit tied because of our relationship with Basketball Australia, but Larry really privatized the league, and he's gotten, pretty famous Yanks to come over and play in it, and I think he's on side with the NBA.
Right.
So I think that, there's so much to like about what the league is, and I watched a bit of a game the other night in a pub in DY in New South Wales, and the presentation looked really good. It looked like, world-class basketball. It wasn't the NBA, but you wouldn't, if you didn't know better, you wouldn't have known the difference. So, I rate what the NBL is doing.
Okay, and a couple of questions a bit out of left field, but we're back to technology, and part of the technology that's evolved in the sports that I'm interested in is assisting the referee. So you can appeal against the referee's decision, or there's a close try, and the technology comes in. And most people would say, well, look, that's great. The more knowledge you have, the better. But increasingly, fans are saying, oh, no, it's gone too far,
Yeah.
To the naked eye, that was a try. Why are we stopping this? Why are we using technology?
Yeah, it's slowing down the game, and that the fan doesn't like. But artificial intelligence now will make that, and I snap my finger, is going to make that decision instantly. And so what we're starting to see is robot umpires and cloud-based AI umpires or referees, and the decision will be made less and less by humans on the field, and more because we'll have more cameras and infrareds and whatever, and we'll just instantly know whether the bloke crossed the try line.
But why do some fans want to return?
Well, they want to return to the old days where the umpires signaled it was a try, and we instantly knew it was a try,
yes.
And then we didn't muck about, debating whether it was a try, and we didn't have the opposing side or the opposing manager running up and down in a lot of the sports they're up in the stadium, but hollering that it wasn't, and in the States now we're throwing red flags on the field and we're protesting and contesting, and the fan is saying it was a try, get on with it, right? Or it was a touchdown, or so I understand where the fan is coming from, but the forces that are driving it is that the owner in the privatized side of sport, or the team manager who feels that they've been wronged, is saying that wrong is going to possibly cost us to lose the game, which is going to cost us millions of dollars. So I don't want humans to get the decision wrong. Where we're going to go is it's going to be done by the computer, and it's going to be done instantly. But the fan still likes the umpire signaling that it's a touchdown or a try, or the goal has gone through.
Yeah, because there's a bit of issue once we've done a bit of research in terms of unconscious bias of the referee, and they react to the crowd, they react to circumstances. This is how important the game is. Any opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I was the commissioner, and I never believed that our referees, because we had referee judges, we had an evaluation panel going on every game, and if we thought a referee was getting too many calls wrong, then they didn't get booked, to do future games, and they didn't get the biggest games and things like that. So I think the leagues work really hard to make sure that there isn't that unconscious bias. But the fans love the thought that there is, right? And so, the gridiron in the States, everyone's been howling for the last 2 weeks that Kansas City was always getting the benefit of the call.
Yeah.
And that was why they were the champions. I don't think it's true, but we love to have a whinge about something.
You see, one of the ways of doing that is if you take home team advantage. There's always home game advantage.
Yeah.
But there's an expected value. So the home game advantage might be 5 points, 6 points. If it starts to become 12 points.
Yeah, we've got a drama.
Yeah.
And if we think the referees are dirty, quotes around it, that they're not completely neutral, then we lose, the belief that the game is either authentic or legitimate. That we just it's not on. And that's the kiss of death for a sports league, is for the fan base to believe that something is, if not rigged, something's not right.
Well, it's good conspiracy. I mean, my team was robbed last. There's no doubt they were robbed last.
Yeah, that's it. And we go to the pub, and all we can do is, and we rail against the referees. We just like they're blind, they have no clue. That But in almost every case, it comes back that the referee was right.
Yeah. So, 2 more questions, and
yeah, you're right.
Given. I don't think I'll have this opportunity to talk to someone like you again. Sports gambling. come into the United States fairly recently.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's making a lot of money for the parties that are being able to monetize the sports. It's been in Australia for years,
Yeah.
and so it's nothing new down here. And in fact, Australian government is now pushing sport gambling a little bit away because they're worried about the influence on young people. But the Yanks are just waking up to the fact that there's sport wagering is allowed, and now you've got the companies like the DraftKings and PointsBet, an Australian company, came into the States for a while.
Yes.
And they're all selling wagering products, and the leagues are, DraftKings or FanDuel is the official partner of the NFL, and so they've sold them a multi-million-dollar, package, which they're sharing that money with the teams, and it's for the Yanks, it's just created this massive influx of cash that hadn't been there.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter what my opinion is. The Yanks right now are thinking it's good. They're not looking at whether anyone's getting hurt by gambling. And that'll come, but we're not there yet.
Okay, I said 2 questions, I actually had 3.
No, you're right.
You've been involved in Japanese soccer.
Yeah.
How's that going?
I don't know. I was there years and years ago, but I think one of the ways for me to answer the question is that sport leagues are becoming global, right? So the NFL, the Gridiron's coming over to Australia in 2026. The NBA has been here. Manchester City or United is going to play a friendly over here.
They own Melbourne, a couple of Melbourne clubs as well.
Yeah, if your league is not global, right, you're in a bit of strife because you're trying to develop a worldwide fan base that can connect with you digitally. So back to your gambling question, the NRL is again opening their season in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And a couple of benefits to that, which is they're making rugby league more of an international game, but they're beachheading into the States. They're breaking into the Yank territory. They're in Vegas, which means they're a gambling play, right? And the reason it's in Vegas is probably very much tied to gambling. And then they're essentially getting their game broadcast live on free-to-air telly. So that, if you look at the NRL, they may lose money in the short term on playing the game, or games actually, in Las Vegas, but they are making their game more international. And so if you ask about the Japanese league, I can't tell you that I've seen anything from any of the Japanese sides or that there's been any discussion of the J League internationally, which means to me, without knowing any truth, that it's possibly shrinking and becoming a smaller league rather than becoming an international league. The MLS, give you an example, the MLS in America, which is a league maybe not that much better than the A-League in Australia, was able to sign Lionel Messi.
Right.
And almost overnight, the Yank Soccer Football League became relevant worldwide. So people in Argentina and people in Spain, where Messi had played, are suddenly following the MLS. I don't know if that's happening with the A-League or the J-League or any of these, but if you're not thinking internationally, I reckon you're falling behind.
Okay. Absolute pleasure talking to you. In all of your career, what's the highlight?
Mate, that's such a very tough question.
It is.
The right answer would be meeting my wife. Right? That would be, that it maybe make someone chuckle listening to the podcast. But, I reckon it would have been being with the NBL. I mean, I would never had a chance to. Lived internationally, lived in Sydney, which is brilliant, and faced all kinds of challenges with trying to run, a league that. Wasn't AFL, wasn't NRL, wasn't, 5-day test cricket, but trying to make the basketball relevant and playing maybe my own small part in how we think about the NBL now. I think that's certainly been a highlight. And this will sound funny, but even just recently being here, being involved with the University of Queensland is really a very nice part of everything that I've gotten a chance to do, because I think that Brisbane with 2032 and the University of Queensland with what it can accomplish in the run-up to 2032, I think is going to be really legendary. I think maybe that's an overused word, but I think that UQ is going to be really well placed for these upcoming Olympics.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to Professor Rick Burton from Syracuse University.